Hey everyone, I want to tell you about another podcast that I love. It's called What Should I Read Next? And it is a show dedicated to answering the question that plagues every single reader. What should I read next? I mean, for me, it's like, which of this like giant pile of books should I read next? But I need help. What Should I Read Next takes a personalized approach to the reading life and helps listeners understand their own taste so they can make the most of their precious reading time. What Should I Read Next is hosted by podcaster, author, and literary tastemaker Anne Bogle. She helps guests understand why they love what they love, why some books that everyone else seemed to love just didn't work for them, and what it means for choosing their next read. You'll get great ideas for books that you specifically will enjoy reading next. Plus, you'll discover books that are absolutely perfect for you, but that you would never find on the bestseller list, on Instagram, or on TikTok. One listener put it this way: there are so many books I didn't even know about or that I didn't know I wanted to read. Not only is my reading life better, my life is better. So listen to What Should I Read Next every Tuesday and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Sarah,
Yes.
Can you open up Kevin Bacon's Instagram?
Annie, I have Kevin Bacon's Instagram open already.
Have you had it open for several weeks as we've been talking about doing this episode?
Kevin
Because I certainly have.
Bacon's Instagram has been giving me life through a lot of drama, and I am so delighted to gaze at him and his zucchini and his wine bottle and his
His
boots
wife,
and
Kira
his
Sedgwick,
wife.
the amazing Kira Sedgwick. So I'm looking at his grid right now.
Okay.
And especially of his like home photos, what would you describe the palette as?
The palette. It's rustic and muted with rich tones of red and plaid, but a lot of black t-shirts. So it's like comforting, saturated colors.
But also like a lot of natural light.
A lot,
right?
and a lot of wood.
Yeah, so much wood. So there's wood in his barn. There's wood
In his kitchen.
where there's like we'll talk about this video later. There's like this really great video of him dancing with Kira Sedgwick. There is
His record player cabinet is
Yes.
regularly featured on the Monday Blues feature of the Kevin Bacon Instagram.
And then like just kind of, he has like a little bit of a tan. Like he has this glow of someone who like clearly spends time outside in some capacity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's not fussy, Kevin Bacon. He just likes to be in the world.
This is the Culture Study Podcast, and I am Anne Helen Peterson.
And I am Sarah Misley. I am a professor of writing at USC, and I edit the webpage Avidly, which is a channel of the Los Angeles Review of Books, and I'm a cultural critic. And I write a lot about hair, which is relevant to this topic.
I was going to say that you are a foremost scholar of hair studies.
I actually, Annie, just today, my books project publication announcement got launched. So I'm the author of the forthcoming Tangled, American Racism and White Women's Hair, which is about, I know, it's very good.
So good.
Yes.
So good.
So stay tuned for my thoughts on Gwyneth Paltrow and Julia Roberts and Elsa from Frozen.
Oh my gosh. We're going to have another podcast
We'll have
episode
another one, yes.
going to exclusively be about this. Okay,
Yes.
So Kevin Bacon
is
a movie star. I mean, I would call him A-list in our current taxonomy of A-list movie star or of stars whose names are like knowable, legible, like people know who Kevin Bacon is. But if we go backwards into like the 80s and 90s, this was not always the case. Like he was actually, at least when I was growing up, like I thought of him very much as like a person whose name I knew, but not as like a leading man.
Yes.
How do you think about him?
So you are the celebrity expert, and can only speak from my personal experience. I think it is the case that he had a couple of big leading man roles and then was not getting more and shifted to character acting. And I think that's the scope of his career. But when I think of Kevin Bacon personally, and I'm, like this is, I think, going to really matter. You're
Millennial,
older
through
millennial,
and through, yes.
and I am younger, but definitely Gen X. So
Yes.
I am imprinted deeply on the Kevin Bacon Footloose dance movie. That is the fundamental bedrock of his career. And the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Kevin Bacon is when I was little and first or second grade, my best friend and I, our backyards connected and we had a pup tent and all summer we'd have sleepovers. And there were 2 soundtracks to those sleepover dance parties out in the backyard in the pup tent in rural Iowa. And one was the Flashdance soundtrack and one was the Footloose soundtrack. So pressing rewind, listening to it over and over again. Let's hear it for the boy, holding on for a hero, Bonnie Tyler. So, Kevin Bacon brings dance to the people who need to be free. So that is the Kevin Bacon mission in my mind.
Can I confess something that makes me so, I think, an interesting co-host for this episode is that I've never seen Footloose. I have seen so many other Kevin Bacon movies. I even recently rewatched, not for this episode, just in life, I rewatched Diner, which was his breakout role.
Which I have not seen, actually. So go ahead.
So, I think we're a great pair to talk about this. Okay, I want to talk, too, about the particular Instagram that made us want to do this episode, which I think brings together this conversation. So it's of him in his barn, and it's after the end of the writer's strike. Can you describe what happens in this Instagram?
So Kevin Bacon, the current Kevin Bacon, who is the current Kevin Bacon. Of a comfortable, lithesome, and ebullient middle-aged man, is in his barn doing the original choreography from the Footloose movie in his t-shirt and his jeans and his cowboy boots, to celebrate the end of the strike, and also coincidentally the 40th anniversary of Footloose, which dates me. Coincidentally, yes. So, and a thing that was really genius about this for me and sent me into spasms of late Jet Nextum is that Ethan Hawke commented on it and was like, "Looking great, man." And I was, my heart filled with joy. And I was like, why can Kevin Bacon and Ethan Hawke stop making whatever Sturm und Drang end of the world movie and make a buddy dance movie? That is what they need. Maybe it's a love triangle with Julia Child. That is what the people need at this time. Or if the people are me.
And I also say that this video, there's something about it aesthetically that is really striking to me. So he has clearly, in the way that I would do this, put the phone on the ground, far away. And then he is centered on his open barn doors. So he's almost backlit. He looks golden in this light, right? And he's wearing these incredible boots.
I mean, they are.
That are very sexy in ways that I don't entirely understand. And then there's this space which just feels grand without being ostentatious. You can see the top of the barn, and it's not a finished barn. It's an open barn, a hay barn.
Yes.
And you're like, what a cool life that you get to just be Kevin Bacon and you still know the choreography.
Yes. So I will say a thing that I really meant to go back and check, but my life did not avail me the time to go back and fully rewatch the Footloose movie. But the Footloose song, "Everybody Cut Loose, Take Off Your Sunday Shoes," that song plays in the final dance scene when he has finally brought dance back to the town, which I just watched, and my mood grew 3 sizes that day, like the Grinch. But
but the plot of the movie is that dance is banned by the pastor, right?
Yes.
And then he brings dance back.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, we have lots of things to say about this. It's a very Reagan era authorities and the mix of political authority and religious authority. And he's going to liberate us from this. And I have a lot of things to say about the idea of liberation. But so he brings dance back. But in my memory, the barn dancing scene is actually him before he's brought back dance. And he's just so frustrated in this small town. And he's doing, I think it might actually be to Holding On to a Hero. I'm not sure. But it's a much more swinging around. He's expressing his freedom individually, but it has not yet come to the collective.
Which this connects with that feeling of during the actor's strike, he couldn't do his craft in the collaborative way that he was accustomed. And so almost this is like still a celebrate. It's like we can bring dance back now.
We can bring dance back now. Yes. Actually, all Hollywood is a metaphor for the footless movie, or vice versa. But here's the thing I want to say about is, so I keep coming back to this idea of like he brings the dance back to the people who need to be free. So this is really my big question for us to discuss, which is that a few years ago, actually I think in the midst of kind of the George Floyd activism, I was talking to a friend of mine named Lisa Corrigan, who is a professor of gender studies at the University of Arkansas and a true genius of social life. I really recommend everyone in the world following her. And she was like, the problem with white women, she is very clear on this. She has several problems with white women, obviously. But she's like, one of them is that they keep thinking that Kevin Bacon made them free. And I was like, back up, he did. Like, dance movies are about freedom. That's what they're about, Lisa. And she's like, and she like very dryly was like, that's cool. If you confine yourself to middle-class somatics, then I guess a dance movie does make you feel free. And I was like, oh. Owned. Totally owned. And so I just really want to repeat that. If you confine yourself to middle-class somatics, a dance movie does make you feel free. And I do feel like that is a big part of the fantasy of Kevin Bacon, especially when he just scrolled through the feed. It's like he's so unburdened of all of these questions. Like he's making a recipe. Yes. What's the recipe? He doesn't know the recipe. I don't even know what it's called. It's chicken a la Kev. Literally, that's what he calls it. He's like, how many anchovies? I don't know. It just turns out good. And then this beautiful woman is behind him like, yummy. So it's like he's free of all of these burdens of intricacy and rules. But a lot of them, like following the recipe, I don't know. I have really mixed feelings about this. Like a lot of those things. Yeah. He's like, he's not worried about sending out the Christmas cards. He's not worried about decorating. And it's like, so he's freed us from that. He's not
worried about his social media as like an apparatus to actually promote himself, which allows his social media to be what it is.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. He's like free from all of these strains of self-presentation. So it feels very good, although looking at a lot of it at once, I actually find kind of grating. But like the dose of it feels very good. But a lot of the things that he feels like he frees us from are things that, and I'll be careful about my we here, but that people of my professional demographic choose. We take on, and then we have this glimpse of freedom and we feel like, oh, freedom. But we haven't actually made any collective change.
So I also want to talk about, just for some more table setting, why we are specifically talking about Kevin Bacon's Instagram and not just like celebrity Instagram or like some other celebrity Instagram. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I was struck by it is because he's doing something that is not entirely unique, right? But it does feel different than what many other celebrities on Instagram are doing, particularly younger celebrities, right? I think he has peers in this arena. I think you can connect him to Jennifer Garner's Instagram. I think you could connect it to Ethan Hawke's Instagram as well. And you can connect it to Mandy Patinkin's Instagram, although his is so, I think, crafted and led in many different ways by his son.
Oh, that makes sense too. And also in it, you can feel, I live in LA. I have various friends who are actors and especially comedians, and being social around them is a lot of enjoying them working out their bits. So yes, you're right. I definitely, and you would know much more about this than me. It's crafted by the sun, but also just their whole vibe is in a constant joyful state of performance for each other. And I think Kevin and Kira, although definitely it is, it's so internal to them that it doesn't have a staged quality. That would not be pleasurable for them in the way that the intuitive relaxation.
Kevin Bacon is married to Kira Sedgwick, who is a massive star herself. They got married. I spent some time on Wikipedia just to like confirm these things. They got married in 1988 when Kevin Bacon was actually sort of bottoming out in his career a little bit because he was in Diner, which led to him being in Footloose, and then kind of struggled to find what his role would be because he was typecast in that way throughout the late 80s. And it wasn't until the 90s that he figured out, oh, I'm a character actor.
Yeah.
And that is when 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, which is like a trivia game that essentially posits that he has been a supporting actor in so many movies that you can connect any actor in Hollywood to any other actor in Hollywood through starting at Kevin Bacon, essentially, like using him as a connective node. I think of all of these different supporting roles, whether it's like Mystic River.
Flatliners was a really big one for me personally.
Yes.
Really important also. More Julia Roberts, Kiefer Sutherland.
With Kiefer Sutherland, which was,
and Oliver Platt. Lots of good hair in that one. Yes.
An amazing moment in gossip history, actually, because that was like right preceding when Julia Roberts like left Kiefer Sutherland at the altar and then went to Ireland with Jason Patric. Like, I'm obsessed with that moment in gossip history, but we can return there later.
Right.
But yeah, so he, I think, is also positioned as someone who is Gen X, who is using social media in an interesting way.
Yes.
Do you have anything else to add to that besides like how we're thinking about it?
Yeah, no, I think I have a pretty mostly recreational relationship to Instagram. I don't keep track of too many celebrities on it. So, but he...
what a different life.
I know.
That's so interesting to
me. But even... I didn't follow Kevin Bacon until recently, but the algorithm just knows that if they post a good video of him dancing, I'm going to send it to all of my Gen X lady group texts. And I do. So, I mean, like, I didn't even have to follow him for them to know immediately.
Do you feel like there's something too about like how he's performing being a certain age in Hollywood?
Yes, definitely. His kind of casual silver foxing, both of them in this very relaxed way. Yeah. And here I do think the Ethan Hawke comparison is really good. And it's interesting because to me, Kevin Bacon feels older than, I mean, I think he's 10 years.
He's a little
I'm
older
47,
for sure.
so he is like 10 years older than me, and Ethan Hawke is 5 years older than me. So Ethan Hawke is much more Frisian-y for me because he's like, he reminds me of the guy I'm mad I dated for so long or whatever. You know, like he's really like, he's a very 90s relationship.
Troy Dyer. That's his character in Reality Bites for others who aren't familiar. But no, that makes sense.
Yeah. So last year, and I have this very Frisian-y relationship to Ethan Hawke. It's a real point of contestation between me and my best friend who loves him. And I'm always like, I hate him. Why is he getting these roles? But last year he gave this very charming interview where I was like, okay, I'm coming around. But it was great. Like, he was just like so generous and was saying these great things about everybody. But the thing he said about himself was, well, for a long time, I was the oldest young guy in Hollywood. And I've just decided that now I'm going to be a young old. Yeah. And my friends and I had this great conversation. And my friend Katie was like, no, I'm going to stay being an old young. And I was like, no, this helps me. I am now a young old. I'm like over it. All tent dresses from here on out. And Ethan Hawke does strike me as a young old, and Kevin Bacon is definitely an old young. Like, he's just like listened to his records and he's like, what? You know, like he's not playing old at all.
Right.
It's a real eternal youth
so
fantasy.
So interesting. Okay, I'm going to save my comparison that I have to a star of classic Hollywood for our questions, which we should start with. Okay. And all of them are essentially... in the same vein, I want to prepare people for this. But it's basically like, why do I like Kevin Bacon's Instagram?
Why do I like Kevin Bacon's Instagram?
Okay, so our first question comes from Angel, and Melody's going to read it.
Why do I love Kevin Bacon's Instagram so much when I get annoyed with other celebrities' accounts? Is it his long-term relationship with his wife? Is it because they seem, quote-unquote, down to earth? And what makes them come across that way on Instagram?
My initial response, and I'm so curious to hear yours, there is this video of Kevin Bacon and Keira Sedgwick dancing in their kitchen. And it's like a normal kitchen.
Yeah.
It is not Stanley Tucci's kitchen.
No.
Right? Like there are no $10,000 ranges in this kitchen.
There are definitely not. Nope.
There's something about the way that it's arranged, the way that they're dressed, also the way that they look that really reminds me of this very famous photo shoot of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. At home, like, and Paul Newman's in like some khaki shorts and socks and loafers, and he is like flipping eggs, standing in the kitchen. I'm gonna send it to you. This is worth sending.
Okay, all right, send it to me.
Hold on, Paul Newman.
Oh my God. The shorts are, and the cat. All right. I encourage anyone listening to Google this and me. Also, how
we
did
will
she
put
get,
it in the show notes.
like, her pants are the perfect crop.
Yeah.
Like,
Aspirational in every single way.
Aspirationally hemmed pants.
And he's making the meal.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that those photos are part of this larger cluster of meanings that circulate around Paul Newman as like a great waspy husband.
Yes.
Who loves his wife. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And his wife is so talented, right? And this is the same thing with Kira Sedgwick. Like, and also they've been married for a really long time and theirs is a love story for the ages. But it's not like super grossly demonstrative.
Yeah.
It's just like a relationship of mutual admiration and respect and love.
Yes.
Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, that's the vibe I get from
Yes.
the performance of their relationship on the Instagram.
Yes. And the loose jointed easiness of how they move to each other, which is this, again, like back to the middle class somatics, right? This sense of you could have the confidence of white middle class authority without any uptightness or ambivalence or anxiety or need to overperform it. So the kind of low hipped and he's like bending his knees and the shoulders. It's such a, I mean, definitely different generations of the thing, but it's such an easily held relation to authority, which is such a privilege, right? It's complete privilege and very beautiful.
Yeah. And it effaces that privilege too, I think. Like,
absolutely.
The other thing too is that, so Kevin Bacon grew up in a super liberal household. Like, that's always been part of the politics that he grew up in. And he and Kira Sedgwick are also not like massive liberal activists, but very much on the forefront of progressive causes, which reminds me of Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward.
Yes.
And also, like, so Kevin Bacon is from Philly. Like, there's something about this like liberal waspiness that really sticks with me. And I think this too, I know that they have a home in Manhattan and then they also seemingly have this farm situation. It just seems very like a type. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, definitely. I do. With this kind of California vibe too.
Yeah. Describe the California vibe, because when I think of you, I think of California vibe, but also,
I mean,
in a good way.
Well, my husband always points out that I am, I don't think of it strategically, but I'm very strategic about when I tell people that I'm from Los Angeles and when I tell people that I'm from rural Iowa. So I'm both of those things.
I'm from Minnesota. I'm from Idaho. I live on an island off the coast of Washington State. All of these things work.
Yes, but it's partly the sunness of those pictures that is a little bit what it's like to live in LA. And why I do really love it, despite my deep Midwesternism, is just like this low light, and there's always enough of it. There's the living room with the big windows and the light streaming in. There's a real abundance and a casualness and a sense of like, are you awesome? You're probably awesome. Like, things are going to work out. It's great.
Yeah, there's just like, oh, I don't have to, like, there's no like time you have to go to work. It's just like, maybe I'll do some work, right?
Well, or there is for 3 months of the year, and it's like, 6 a.m. call times. But the rest of the time you're like, oh yeah, so I took a meeting, like, and I worked out. I live in a very casual, I don't live in the Hollywood industry part of thing, but it's still a lot of writers around. So the coffee shops are amazing. It's just, everyone looks so chill. They're like I always say that LA, coming from a cold place, there's always the first day when it gets warm and all the girls like put on their little sundresses and they're so full of joy. LA is like that all the time.
But then you don't get to appreciate it as much. It's just kind of like an underlying ease.
But it turns out that being happy all the time is nice. And just to bring it back around, I am a serious Midwesterner. I was always like, that is such a deprived way of living. But actually, being happy all the time is nice. And that is really what I see on the Kira Kevin webpage.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, just to bring it around.
Yeah. So his record corner, he does this feature where once a week or so.
Mondays. I think it's Monday Blues.
Yeah. So he like puts the camera up, and I'm so curious. Like, does he have a tripod for his phone?
I don't know.
Right, but you don't. In my head, he does not have a tripod.
In
for
my
his phone,
head, yeah.
right?
He's
he just like
propping
sets
on
it
there.
up, and then he's like, "Hey, let's just talk about some of my records."
Hey guys, it's Kev.
Let's just talk about some records, and it feels filled with ease, as you said.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
here's someone with time to listen to music.
Yeah.
Like what a lovely thought. And
Yeah.
I think when we think about the history of celebrity, like one of the ways that we consume celebrity, one of the reasons is for their performance of leisure.
Yes.
And I think that
he's really good at it.
the particular form of leisure that he is like, there's nothing noxious about it. There is nothing either that screams privilege, right? Even though we've been talking about all the ways that this is like an ease of navigating the world that is privileged, there's nothing that is like a big ticket item. Like it all is very stars are just like us, aspirationally.
Yes. With this perfect beauty and perfect casual relation, and they're kind of snarky but clearly affectionate kids, and a great house and a lot of goats. There's a lot of goat content.
So many goats.
So many goats.
Goats are kind of the perfect content too because they're kind of funny,
I know.
but they're not.
Yeah.
It's not like overly precious. I kind of wish he
It's
had
not
pigs,
like it's
too.
horses.
Yes.
I mean, I think he does, but it's him like goofing around with his goats is really different than like, here's my show horse. Are there other, I feel like the question was, why do I like this so much? Is there more versions of this question, or are we pursuing this? Because I have more things to say.
let's go on to the next question, which is from Gretchen, which I think will open up some discussion for us.
Why is Kevin Bacon's Instagram so comforting and delightful? I like him way more now than I did at the height of his fame. I can't help but wonder how much of it is Kira and cute farm animals and guy with the guitar vibes. Everyone, especially celebrities, cultivates their images to some extent, but Kevin Bacon seems pretty genuine and wholesome, kind of Jennifer Gardner-esque. Also, why is he always a two-name guy in my mind? It's never just Kevin, always Kevin Bacon.
I'll answer the last part of that question, which at least for millennials, Kevin is something, and I think this has a lot to do with Home Alone. One name Kevin is a rascal.
Right. Yes.
Always a rascal. And this also has to do with my very good friend who I grew up with. My next door neighbor was a real Kevin. Like his name is Kevin and he was a real Kevin.
Yeah.
And so I think that Kevin Bacon situates him as a professional in some capacity.
Yeah.
But where were you going to go for the first part?
Yeah, I was just thinking also, this is really nerdy, Eddie, but just like the double trochee, the Kevin Bacon name, like it has... Just to do some scansion on Kevin Bacon's name.
Yeah. For the nerds out there.
For the nerds out there. Right. Yeah. For the poetry nerds. So one thing to say about this is like the relation to Kira is really important. The last question too is like, is this the long-term relationship? I have an interesting relationship to this as somebody who is now remarried, but exceptionally happily divorced. That was a really positive thing for everyone involved. So the fantasy of we've been together forever, I'm a little bit immune to. Like, I don't really believe in famous marriages. I feel like the performance of the perfect marriage, I'm just like, what's going on?
Are they really doing a Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith behind the scenes? Yeah.
Like, which is great. Like,
totally great.
But like, I'm really in favor of whatever people work out. But the investment in the relationship is always like a little bit of a red flag for me.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, he recently in September, I wrote down the date, posted a picture on September 4th, their 35th wedding anniversary, and it's a picture of them.
Oh, yeah,
and
I saw this.
He is sitting at a kitchen table and he has no shirt on and he's very slim and very tan, very boyish body. And she is leaning on his lap. So he's facing the table and her, and she's facing the camera, and she's got a tank top on and her hair is in a messy bun, which I am clearly aspiring towards at this moment, and a tank top and a jean mini skirt. And she's just like super comfortable. And she's like, being held by this guy who's doing a really good job of it, even though he's not paying a lot of attention to it.
Yeah.
That is such a fantasy. And to get further nerdy, I actually was thinking of, there's a particular fantasy here. I went and pulled up the opening pages of a wonderful book of criticism called Cruel Optimism by the queer theorist Lauren Berlant, which is talking about the kind of genres that we get attached to try and help us get us through a hard time. She's also interested in the way that some of our attachments are counterproductive. They stand in the way of us getting what we want. That's what cruel optimism is when the thing that you think is going to solve the problem actually impedes accomplishing it. But she says that this feeling of attachment is really powerful right now because so many fantasies are fraying. And here is her list of the fantasies that are fraying include particularly upward mobility, job security, political and social equality, and lively, durable intimacy. And that phrase, the fraying fantasy of lively, durable intimacy, is what Kevin and Kira offer us so beautifully, like that easy way of being together that like it seems so enlivening for them, and it makes they seem so happy in their bodies together.
You know, to take that and translate it or map it onto star theory, you know, Richard Dyer, the father of star studies as we know it, like his theory was that every celebrity, you can look at them and look at their image, look at all of the different meanings that circulate around their image, all the photos, all of the conversations, all the gossip, everything that they've appeared in, right? And you can understand, if they're incredibly popular, that they are embodying an ideology that is under threat.
Yes.
Right? Like they are proving that it is still possible.
Right.
And still aspirational. Right?
Yes.
And maybe that you shouldn't necessarily like worry about it too much, right? But like if we're connecting it to this idea that this is something that people are actually like is absolutely under threat and people feel no small amount of anxiety about that, then clearly this is something that feels soothing in this moment.
So I think that's really powerful. And a small thing about this that I'm very curious your thoughts on, it's all so effortless and they're just always in their kitchen, they're making us great food and they're like chatting and they're dancing and they're eating, and they are very thin people. And like speaking as a perimenopausal woman myself, it's like like, what's she doing? like I'm very curious, right? Like there's they're just eating chicken a la Kev. So like there's some work going on.
It's like
besides.
cool girls. It's like a cool girl thing, right? Like that you can eat whatever you want and still have the ideal body. And like, you know, women's bodies are wild. Like the things that everybody can and does and doesn't eat, and how bodies react to those things. Like, gosh, that is the one thing that I have learned. It's like,
you don't know.
You don't know what someone is doing or not doing.
You don't know.
To their skin, to their body, anything.
And I don't say that in any judgmental way at all.
Totally.
I think there are zero okay ways to have a woman's body in public. Like it's, you know, it's so, but I do think that is, that I feels like a part of what I see when I look at them. Like it's possible, like she's wearing his t-shirts from Animal House, you know, like his cast t-shirt from Animal House. It's like, and it just looks so good and loose on her. And she just, they're just carrying the tank top existence well into their 50s. And I was like, that's what I want. Yeah. How long do I have to? I don't know.
I also think maybe there's something, and I would love to hear your thoughts as a parent of an older child. Like they've navigated the empty nest moment and their kids seem to like them, right? Like, doesn't that seem nice?
Yeah. It seems so nice. They like each other. Their kids like them. Yeah. They seem to have gone through pretty smoothly, which is nice.
Yeah.
So yes. So that I do think is why it feels so good to look at it.
Is there something specifically about like his boots? I feel like you really liked looking at all of the different boots that he wears. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk about either his boots or his hair in more detail.
Right. Yes. Yes. So, well, I too like boots. And I think, And I wear them a lot. I did not wear them out when I was growing up in an actual rural space, but now that I'm in Los Angeles, Westerness, I have some great workwear boots that I got in an actual workwear farm, and I get complimented on them all the time.
Yeah.
And he has the same thing, that it's like, they look great, but also he clearly wears them when he's out with the goats.
Yeah.
So like the fantasy of that, of like this kind of boot masculinity, just makes him seem really capable and relaxed. Like my husband does this thing where he just like hooks his thumb in his jean pocket, like in this rural town way. I don't know if you have this. And it just like, I'm like, yes, you are a man. Right. And, but he's also like,
Kevin Bacon definitely does that.
Right. It's like just this, and he's not rural, but he has this kind of like country way, which when partnered with the like, you can have this fantasy of American white manhood that's like, and it's benevolent. It's purely benevolent.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to think about colonial extraction or, right. But that, I mean, although that's what it is, but you don't have to think about it, or it's stripped of all potential Trumpiness or just embattledness.
Yeah.
He's completely unembattled.
Yeah. His masculinity is not under threat.
Yes.
Like he is confident in where his masculinity resides.
Yes. I was noticing that there's this is September 24th, a photo of him. And the caption of the Instagram photo is, "Any suggestions on how to cook this?" And he's leaning towards the camera in a white tank top. And he's not like buff. It's kind of loose on him. He's not doing Marlon Brando levels of like white tank top victory, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, it's still really, his body is on display, and you can kind of see this little tattoo, and he's holding this huge
this is a
zucchini.
Anyone who has ever vegetable gardened knows this is a mid-September zucchini.
And my advice to him is zucchini pancakes. That's what I would. Yes, that's what I would say. But it's just totally like, he's like, here's my hot body, and I'm leaning forward, offering to you this huge tumescent tuber. And it's just like, he's like, that's how his masculine is. Like, look, I got it in my hands. I'm not stressed about it. It's like, I can make light of it. And that's so great, right? It's like barely double entendre. He's like, because he is going to cook it, right? So it's like.
Well, okay. Well, I'm looking at this image right now too.
Yes.
What's going on with his hair here?
Oh, right. It's so, like, again, it's like, I think he has earbuds in as well. Very interesting.
Yes, he has some beats in.
yes. And this is an interesting kitchen slot as well. Like, you can see it's like nice, but not fancy. And it's like, it's not too, he seems to have a lantern hanging from the ceiling. But the hair, I mean, he's going gray. He hasn't lost it.
I recognize this hair. Like, I have seen this hair in many a 50-year-old man. I think that it's similar to my dad's hair. It's incredibly straight. And there's like a little bit of grease going on.
A little bit. Like, he hasn't washed very recently.
He hasn't washed very recently. Like, this is and you can see by like just the bags under his eyes and that sort of thing. Like, this is a man who has like rolled out of bed. It's also looking at the wrinkles in his forehead. Like, this is also a man who has not gotten Botox.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he's gotten some work done. I don't know. But like, it's not this sort. He doesn't have the smoothness that I have come to like with Tom Cruise, say.
Yeah. Or John Travolta. I feel like is a really like scared of aging. Bless. I mean,
and both of those men, to me, they increasingly look like almost like Grecian, like death masks of themselves, right?
Yes. And, oh my God.
In a way that is very uncanny.
Yeah.
And that people understand is uncanny. And I don't think that's like, people do whatever with their faces, but this is what happens, is that you increasingly look like, I don't know, like a memory of yourself. And he seems to be like, this is what I look like. And I think that sort of comfort is also when people are like, oh, he's so like silver fox hot, part of what they are articulating is like, this is a man who is at ease with the way that he looks, with the way that his body is, with the place that he resides in the world, with his place in Hollywood even, right? Like, he is not trying to be the king of Hollywood still, the way that Tom Cruise is.
Yeah, yes. Although I did see this morning that he is now going to, there's a new more nostalgia. Beverly Hills Cop coming out next spring. That was the current in which he will play the bad guy. So it's Kevin and Eddie.
Oh, he's such a good bad guy.
He's a really good bad guy. Yeah, I know. And that's like, he's partly good at this. Okay. But one thing, a word that I am not sure we have said at all, but even if so, we should just like qualify that all of this luxury and middle classness, it's really about a vision of whiteness and white ruralness. And the hair too is really whiteness. So, I mean, that in the way that we're saying that the privilege is really latent in this, like the account is not about race overtly, but it's a real performance of benevolent whiteness. Like that you can have this, you could have all of this success and all of this stuff and do so in a way that looks relaxed and pleasant. And I think like that is particularly soothing to, I mean, I won't speak for other people, but certainly for me as a middle-class white person who wants to feel like I am doing good in the world and could also maybe have nice stuff.
Yeah.
And who also really struggles with the question of what's an ethical relation to things. Like it's a real vision of whiteness and
of reconciling that tension, right?
Yes.
And because these are two things that, like you said, I grapple with this all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, how do we dismantle privilege and like the things that privilege affords, while also being like, oh, but also I want nice things,
right? Exactly, and I mean, it goes back to the thing that I said at the beginning about, well, this looks like freedom. And if you're like, I'm constraining myself to an uptight version of whiteness, then here is a model of how I can free myself from that. And so it has an effective tone of liberation. But my friend who made this point to me about how Kevin Bacon never got anybody free has a much more socially collectivist idea of freedom that's based on certain levels, I mean, like broad levels of accountability and recognition that a dance scene might be related to, but also can stand in for in a way that might be problematic.
Hey everyone, it's Anne. Just popping in to say we're recording a bunch of new episodes in the next month and we want and need your questions. We're working on shows about Sephora Teens, online shopping culture, like all of the weirdness that's around shopping for things online, contemporary trends in romance, why we get so mad at and about celebrities, just as a general idea, and generational nostalgia. Oh, and we're also looking for you to tell us about like weird trends in your TikTok For You page, FYP. If there's something that you keep seeing, it's like a trend, and you're like, what is happening? We want to unpack that for you. We're going to do a whole series where we unpack like clusters of various trends. So if you have questions about any of these things, you can find the link to the Google form at culturestudypod.substack.com or type in tinyurl, tinyurl.com/culturestudypod. And if you're a paid subscriber, remember to use your super special form so that your questions go to the front of the line. Okay, back to the show. Can we quickly, before we go to our last question, you, at the very beginning, you said like you had some things to say about Kevin Bacon, Footloose, and how this resides within like a Reaganist America. And I wanted to make sure that we had time to talk just a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so like this early 80s moment, when was the moment, which I think was the moment of his biggest stardom.
Yes.
So there's Footloose, where there had been a moment of kind of cultural liberation and then a huge retreat from that, from the election of Reagan, and the deep alignment of Christian values with corporate impulses and militaristic impulses. So very territorial and capital hungry politics aligned with the Christian ethos, which my grandfather was a minister. I think this is a very debased version of Christianity, but that's a separate point. But all of those things were aligned, and Reagan's appeal of this like 1950s version, like fantasy of American World War II masculinity, was kind of attached to the rural spaces of America specifically. And so the Footloose plot of I'm coming from a city to a little town that has fallen under this very oppressive regime, and I'm going to teach everybody to dance, and so then we'll be free of the politics.
Right.
So it's like, what do you need to get, like, what would change the world? Prom, you know? And like prom when you're 17 can feel really significant. And when I'm not saying that we can't learn lessons about freedom from movement. I actually really think that we can, but it's also a substitutional logic. And the other movie that I will say quickly that really stands in as a Reagan era movie that's very implanted in my brain, Kevin Bacon's starring role in Quicksilver, where he plays a stockbroker who loses all of his money, gives it all up, becomes a bike messenger. And he's like, I don't care anymore. And he gives this amazing speech to one of his old stockbroker friends about how free he is. And he's like, the sign says go left and I go right. You know, it's like total, again, a somatic freedom. Like his body doesn't have to follow these rules. But at the end, Kevin Bacon's friend who wants to start a hot dog stand loses all of his money to a loan shark. So Kevin Bacon takes the remaining money. And guess what, Annie? Guess what he does? He goes back to the stock market and saves his white ethnic friend from the loan shark with capitalism.
Right.
So, like, so there's, I mean, and I have not seen that movie in a long time, but I really remember this speech. So he's like both free of capitalism, but he can use it to be benevolent.
Okay. This is a horrible transition, but we're going to run with it.
Yeah.
And go into our last question, which I think is a way for us to wrap up our discussion specifically of the Instagram. We're going to roll with it. So it's from Caitlin.
My only question is, isn't this exactly what you would do if you were low-key stoned and rich as hell?
Well, I think this goes into that question of like how this is offering a solution to this like difficult reconciliation of like liberal values and like acquisition, right? Yes. It's like, I would not have the $10,000 stove, but I'd still have a pretty sick property.
Right.
And I would just like play my records all the time. Like that would be
my records. I was just re-listening to like one of the Blues Monday. It's from the W's. He's listening to all these records alphabetically. And so he was listening to the Who, and he's like, "Long live rock!" And he's like God is like devil. And he's just like, love and life. Van Halen, man.
I think that we answered this in a lot of ways, but I think that is in some ways a great encapsulation of like why we gravitate to this content on like a pretty surface level way. Yeah, of course, this is how I would want to live my life. It's aspirational, but once we start to unpack it a little bit more, we can see what that means, right? Yeah. What does it actually mean to be aspirational, and why is this particular account aspirational in all of these different ways?
Yes, definitely. As a kind of a way to maybe wrap this up, I was watching a little reel where it's Kevin and Kira talking with the director of their foundation about why they do charity work. And Kevin was really sweet with Kira. He's like, you were always really into causes, like more than me, you know, which is also this fantasy of like, I was just this bro and like, you made me better. Yeah. And Kira gives this very sweet and not wrong account of change doesn't have to be big. I really believe in grassroots. We have to make these small changes and they build up. And that's not wrong, but also how comforting. Right? How comforting to the specific audience of white middle class, middle-aged people like myself to know, you could just make these small changes. And that is what we need. And that itself, precisely the truth in it, makes it a somewhat pernicious narrative of what, not that we shouldn't make the small changes, but like that, it's not revolution.
It's not revolution. I don't think any celebrity can offer us revolution.
No.
But I want to know, who are your favorite Gen X celebrities?
Oh my gosh, Annie, who are my favorite? What a question I really have to prepare. My favorite Gen X. I guess a thing that I will say is that I recently watched with my kids, who are both teenagers, High Fidelity, the John Cusack movie. Yeah. And before we watched it, they had never seen a John Cusack movie. So I showed them the scene for Say Anything, where he's like, I don't want to sell anything that's been bought or processed or process anything. And I was like, okay, so this is John Cusack. You haven't seen all the other movies, but this is the thing. And he's holding the boombox, In Your Eyes, Ione Sky, Amazing. And then we watched High Fidelity. And High Fidelity is really itself a referendum. John Cusack doing a referendum on Gen X.
On John Cusack's.
Yeah, absolutely. And I knew that. And that's why it was so charming, right? It's like super Chicago. It's great. But watching it, I was like, oh my God. Like it's not that I didn't know he's terrible, because that's the plot of the movie, but it is an astonishing just memoir of horror. And it really made me feel like all these things, like the tough guy and Breakfast Club. So I'm like, like the rebels, like that's what appeals to me. And I was like, they all sucked. And I'm so glad that the kids today are like, no, we don't need that. That's toxic. So I don't feel, I'm like, Ethan Hawke, great. We can just leave them all behind. I'm really happy to turn towards the genderqueer future and follow the children in our future. They will lead us.
All right. I think this is a wonderful place to stop. Paid subscribers are about to get the Ask Anne Anything segment after this. Melody and I are going to answer a question about gardening. If that sounds like something you need to hear, head to culturestudypod.substack.com and support the show. Your subscriptions make this show sustainable. Sarah, where can people find you online if they want more of your work?
So my social media handle is Sunset and Echo, which is the corner where I catch the bus here in Los Angeles. And you can find me at sarahmesley.com or at avidly.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This
Thank
was
you.
a real delight. Total
you.
delight. Thanks for listening to the Culture Study Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We have so many great episodes in the works, and I promise you don't want to miss any of them. If you want to suggest a topic, ask a question about the culture that surrounds you, or submit a question for our subscriber-only Advice Time segment, check the show notes for a link to our short and easy submission form. If you want to support the show and get bonus content and make the show sustainable, head to culturestudypod.substack.com. It's $5 a month or $50 a year, and you'll get totally ad-free episodes, an exclusive Advice Time segment, weekly discussion threads for each episode, and a link to a special Google form so that your questions go to the front of the line. The Culture Study Podcast is produced by me, Anne Helen Peterson, and Melody Rowell. Our music is by Poddington Bear. You can find me on Instagram at Anne Helen Peterson, Melody at Melodious47, and the show at Culture Study Pod.